Welcome to Bluegrass Brooklyn, our podcast all about the music we love, straight from the Bluegrass borough of Brooklyn, New York. Welcome everybody to Season 2, Episode 11 of Bluegrass Brooklyn. This episode we go on the road to Australia. I'm Mike Wilner. Our co-host Liz has the week off. A few months ago, I had the opportunity to travel to Australia. I was in Sydney and Canberra. I had some difficulty identifying bluegrass music through web searches. So I wasn't too hopeful, and boy was I surprised what I found there. So we're going to get to talk to Bruce Packard, who's a 30-year veteran bluegrass musician in Australia. We'll meet the High Street Drifters that include in their repertoire some of the most driving, straight-ahead bluegrass you'll ever want to hear, but much more. And we get to meet Linda Dowdy, who is a dipped and dyed Missourian who somehow or other wound up in Australia, married to a banjo maker, Lawyer Grundy. All very interesting stories, a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoy me sharing this experience with you. Before we get started, I want to note a couple of things that are coming up. July 16th through 20th is the Gray Fox Festival up in Oak Hill, New York. It's one of the largest regional bluegrass festivals and not to be missed. Our co-host Liz will be up there playing, jamming, and doing some podcasting. So if you're up there, go say hi. Friday, July 18th in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn at Delia's Lounge on 93rd and 3rd, 7 p.m. There's going to be a very special jam. It's the 3rd Avenue Summer Stroll. They close the whole avenue. Pedestrians and families and everybody's wandering around, and we'll be out there playing for them. And then, of course, Monday, August 4th through Friday, August 8th, up at the Ashokan Center, we have our Bluegrass Week. The whole community is going to converge there, and it's going to be a fantastic time. We'd love to see you there. And if you're there, we'll be podcasting, and we'd love to get to talk with you. So before we begin, let me remind you, please follow us on Instagram at Bluegrass Brooklyn. Brooklyn spelled B-K-L-Y-N. You can check in on our Facebook, same name, Bluegrass Brooklyn. And you can visit bluegrassbrooklyn.com. And if you're looking for jams in Uptown Manhattan, the Bronx, and Riverdale, definitely check out bluegrassjamsnearme.com. Okay, I hope you enjoy sharing this experience with me. Let's roll. We got to the National Folk Festival where musicians from all over Australia converge, about an hour outside of Canberra. We got a chance to speak with Bruce Packard, who is a member of this Melbourne Scottish Fiddle Club, but also a 30-year veteran of bluegrass music. We spoke to him about his musical background, how bluegrass even wound up in Australia, and of course we asked him about his Mount Rushmore of bluegrass performers. So let's listen. We are here with Bruce Packard at the National Folk Festival, and Bruce is associated with the Melbourne Scottish Fiddlers Club.
Yep.
So first of all, Bruce, thank you for taking time today.
That's great.
First things first, let's establish your bluegrass bona fides.
Yeah. Okay, I've been playing bluegrass, I think, for about 30 years. I've been a mandolin player and a double bass player about that long, and as soon as I started playing those instruments, I gravitated towards bluegrass. I think the first 10 years I was probably on the wrong track, and then I played in a very traditional bluegrass band who put me on the right track and told me what to listen to and what not to do and so forth. I feel I've been well schooled by the bluegrass police, but that doesn't mean I always play it straight.
The occasional transgression may still occur, huh?
Oh, many transgressions. My main bluegrass band for many years is a comedy bluegrass band called Coolgrass, which does very, very weird versions of bluegrass. So we do Mozart bluegrass style, or Queen bluegrass style, or we do Bill Monroe in bossa nova style. And anyway, but deliberately bizarre things.
I just want the listeners to realize we're here in Canberra, in Australia, and this is quite a surprise for me to come across a bunch of bluegrass players. It's a wonderful folk festival. People are wandering around from tent to tent listening to music, some of which you can hear in the background. So let's hear a little bit about Scottish fiddling and what your involvement is and what the club's objectives are.
Yeah, the Melbourne Scottish Fiddle Club got started 30 years ago. The founder, Judy Turner, was living in the States in Boston, and one of the delights of her time in the States was being part of the Boston Scottish Fiddle Club. And when she came back to Australia, she, being a very organised, sort of proactive person, straight away thought, what can I do to recreate this feeling in Australia? So she started off the fledgling Melbourne Scottish Fiddle Club 30 years ago, and gradually it went from something small and amateur and very, very fledgling to something really large and special. I mean, it's now got about 100 members.
Wow.
We've toured New Zealand, Scotland, we're off to Canada this year. It's an incredible organisation of young and old fiddlers, and not just fiddlers. We've got harps and cellos, and I play double bass occasionally with them, mandolins, piano, all sorts, and lots of the up-and-coming fiddlers in Australia, the whole Australian folk scene, have now been part of the Scottish Fiddle Club at some stage and cut their teeth, if you like, playing fiddle in that club.
Can you tell me a little bit about the repertoire that they choose?
Some of it's really traditional Scottish fiddle music. Some is stuff written by the club in a similar style. Some of it's Canadian, from the part of Canada where the Scots also settled, and some of it's Quebecois music. Mostly it's similar-ish, Scottish-ish sort of feel, but it's not slavishly traditional. Far from it.
Interesting. We have a concert later today, don't we?
Oh yeah, we got a very large concert in the main venue here.
I'm looking forward to that a lot. And you also mentioned your sound guy, the most important person in the room, it turns out.
Well, my role this weekend is actually as the bass player, but yeah, normally my role with the Fiddle Club is their sound person. I've been their sound person since about 2008.
So how on earth did music from America's Appalachian Mid-Atlantic region find its way here to Australia in terms of bluegrass? And also, what is the origin of bluegrass here in Australia?
The first bluegrass bands in Australia started in the early 60s. There's nothing anyone's aware of before then, and it started off very small and slow. Then in the 70s, there was quite a lot of activity, and the bluegrass bands at that time started bringing out people like Dan Crary and Byron Berline and Tim O'Brien. So they came to Australia in perhaps the late 70s and early 80s and kicked things off a little bit in terms of people's interest. But really it's just been gradually growing, not necessarily run by expatriates, but just by people that have an interest in that sort of music.
We find all kinds of people in the U.S. are drawn into the bluegrass circle. In the U.S. we have some loose-knit organizations, and we have the International Bluegrass Music Association, things like that. What have you got here in Australia?
Yeah, there are a couple of largish organisations and many small ones. I'm involved with one of the large organisations which goes by the long name of the Australasian Bluegrass and Old-Time Music Association, and we put on a large bluegrass festival each November in the mountains in Victoria called Mountain Grass, and that's been going in one form or other for about 30 years.
Wow.
There are probably lots of little local organisations. I'm involved with a Melbourne bluegrass organisation called the Mountain Pickers Association. We run monthly concerts that can be just local bands or international bands or whatever, a whole mix of things.
It's fascinating that this music takes a hold wherever it goes. I know that I recently listened to an album by J.D. Crowe in Japan, right? So,
yeah.
Everywhere you go. Okay, so now I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Are you familiar with the American Mount Rushmore, where...
I'm aware. I've been to Mount Rushmore.
Oh, so we have the four faces.
Yeah.
These are the four most iconic American individuals. I ask people for their bluegrass Mount Rushmore. So I'm going to ask you to choose your four most iconic bluegrass artists. It doesn't have to be the best, or you're just the ones who have the most impression on you, and why?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I'm not from the traditional side of bluegrass at all. It was quite a while that I'd been playing bluegrass before I heard any Bill Monroe at all.
Huh.
And once I heard Bill Monroe, I thought, oh, is that what it sounds like? I had actually started listening to people like David Grisman years after I heard Bill Monroe and found what Bill Monroe's style of bluegrass sounded like, and yeah, it wasn't quite what I had in mind. So,
Yes.
So my Mount Rushmore would be a very different one to most people's. Mine would definitely include David Grisman.
For sure.
It would definitely include John Duffy. I never got to see him live, unfortunately, but every time I listen to something John Duffy did, it just puts a smile on my face. I just love it. After those two, Jens Kruger, again, he's hardly straight bluegrass, but I find his banjo playing just magical. As you can tell from my choices. And then the last one will be Tim O'Brien. I mean, Tim O'Brien, in so many respects, his songs, his playing, his singing, in every respect, he's one of the icons for me.
Certainly. You know, David makes it onto a lot of people's Mount Rushmore. So tell me a little bit more about this festival in November. Are you going to be performing or sound manning? Or?
This time, probably everything. On the committee to help run it, I'll probably be the main sound person. I'll probably be performing with a band as well. We usually bring in 2 or 3 overseas acts, usually at least a couple of American acts and perhaps a Canadian act, and sometimes from other countries as well.
So I'm curious, how you got started in music? As a kid, or did you come to it as an adult? Or?
Actually, this connects back to the Melbourne Scottish Fiddle Club, because Judy Turner, the founder of the club, and I went to primary school together, and we both started our musical careers together, playing recorder in the school band.
Oh, that's the worst possible instrument to start someone on.
And then at high school, we both started violin lessons at the same time, and she continued and I very quickly gave up. I didn't have any connection to violin at all. I kept looking around for the instrument that I played, and eventually came to guitar, and quite a lot later came to double bass.
And what music were you playing? It wasn't bluegrass?
No. I probably knew lots of Leonard Cohen songs when I started playing guitar, lots of Bob Dylan stuff, but no, I probably hadn't even heard the word bluegrass at that stage.
What would you say is the Australian equivalent of bluegrass music? Is there a type of music that comes more from rural and mountain, or?
I don't think there's anything quite like it. Australia has a sort of a bush music tradition, which is the closest. It's a long way from being bluegrass. It's more like a sort of a dance music. It probably has more in time with old-timey and Scottish music and Irish music than it does with bluegrass. It might be played on similar instruments, but musically it has better relations to old-timey Scottish and Irish.
If our listeners wanted to hear what bush music sounds like, can you mention any artists or particular tunes they should be searching for?
You'd be going back a couple of decades to a very famous pop crossover bush band called the Bushwhackers, a fun, impressive sort of pop version of bush bands.
So I want to thank you very much for joining. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy today, but I really learned a lot. I hope our listeners did too, and thank you for your time.
You're very welcome, very welcome.
There were a lot of bands performing at the festival, but one that stood out were the High Street Drifters, 4 young musicians who came together and formed a dynamic, driving bluegrass band. They play traditional, they play their originals, which are closely aligned to traditional sound. And we got to talk to them and hear about the experience of bluegrass musicians in Australia today. Let's listen in. Okay, so we're here with the High Street Drifters, a bluegrass band from here in Australia. How on earth did you guys here, a good 17 or 20,000 miles away from the mid-Atlantic Appalachian coast of the United States, get into bluegrass music?
We all have our individual stories.
I was living in a van for a while, and then listening to the Grateful Dead for a while, and then I moved to Canada and joined a bluegrass band over there, and that's when I got my taste for it. But there's a scene in Australia that supports that too, so you just got to go looking quite hard.
We were in Sydney, and it was seemed like, well, there's the monthly jam, and that was about all we could find. I'm sure there's more. So how about you, Gage?
I was in uni, and a mate of mine actually played banjo for the fun of it. He asked me if I wanted to be in a bluegrass band, and I was like, great, I don't know what that is. And went and looked it up and was like, I could play this. So I tried, and then it just became an obsession.
Yeah. May, what about you?
My mum hired a bluegrass band for her wedding. And they were awesome, and Gage was in that band. And I got obsessed with it from there and joined the band.
I got into it through my father, and I grew up with bluegrass records, and he was a flat picker. He had a couple of Martin guitars. When I first started playing guitar at home, I was sneaking into his room and grabbing his nice Martin and playing flat picking tunes and stuff. That's how I originally got into it.
It's interesting how everybody who describes it has got addicted, got obsessed, got bitten by the bug. It's just very engaging music. Is there much of a jam culture here in Australia?
Like Justin said, you got to find it, but it's definitely there. Or grow it yourself. I host a jam at a bar in Melbourne. It's a monthly bluegrass jam.
Same in Adelaide, I hold a bluegrass jam monthly.
It's underground, but people who are playing it know what's up and get together. If we can convince a bar, let us sit there and play music all night.
That's right.
Then we do it in public.
It's also a bit of a responsibility to nurture this scene because we are so far away from where it originated. It is a small scene in Australia.
As widespread as Australia is,
Yeah.
we've got our mates from Queensland here, and getting together at a place like this is like half the community.
Yeah, I was quite surprised at how many people I spoke to were into bluegrass. How did you guys come together as a band?
Good hit. And
Yeah.
I came back to Australia and I was playing. And then on the internet, actually, I met May over Instagram. You know, we're all musicians stuck in our houses over lockdown, nothing to do besides practice. So she was posting some videos. I just reached out and me and Daniel connected in Melbourne. I was telling Dan, being like, yeah, this is a great fiddle player. Over the border there, if we can ever get there. And then May was telling me about Gage, her partner, plays bass, and Dan's like, yeah, I know Gage. Way back. Lockdown was pretty brutal for us in Melbourne, especially, so it took about 2 years of talking before we actually all got together.
Yeah.
So how does the repertoire work? Where do you center? Like a traditional bluegrass or...
Ooh.
I didn't. That wasn't meant to be a hard question.
I think the magic of the Drifters and what we do is that we all take our influences and way outside the genre as well. So we do quite traditional Stanley Brothers stuff, and then also write a lot of new material that's
Contemporary bluegrass sounding.
So do you guys tour or is it local?
We're kind of on the tail end of a tour, yeah.
We've been doing a big summer of festivals, and the folk festival that we're at right now is pretty much the last of it. We'll take a little break over winter and pick up again.
We do a lot of festivals, and I think we're still relatively in our infancy as far as a band goes, so if we build more momentum doing our own shows outside of festivals, it's probably the next stage for us. It's a hard thing to do in Australia because there's no promoters really doing acoustic music, so...
But we've played every state except South Australia and Northern Territory.
Yes, something been around. Touring is a different kind of beast in Australia as well. Things are far away and we don't have really big hubs. Everything's 6-7 hour drive to get to a big town. Our approach this summer was we put out this record and we're just like, let's do a whole bunch of festivals. Let's travel around and make the connections through them.
You mentioned a CD that you put out recently. What was that like going into the recording studio? Oh, no, I guess that's another good question.
We tracked it live in a day, and that was a lot for us to do.
How many songs?
6.
We squeezed 6 in.
We stayed in a house for a week beforehand.
Crammed for a bit,
Yeah, and we did all of the tracks without vocals first. So we practiced playing without any of the singing, which was a great way to learn all the arrangements.
It was a full-on day, but the idea was to be as tight as possible, and we really wanted just the live sound of us out there. We didn't want any kind of smoke and mirrors and try to avoid as much editing as possible. Kind of say, this is what we are, this is just acoustic instruments into a microphone, this is what you're going to hear when you hear us live. So
How acoustic are you when you're on stage?
we've settled at the fact that we like the freedom of the mic situation. So like moving around the one mic to sing vocals is a real joy.
And it's entertaining for Australian People do very rarely see it, so they're like,
That's it, the bluegrass shuffle. Everybody shuffles out in a way and somehow avoids stepping on each other.
Sound engineers or sound people at live stages, they're either horrified or delighted.
So any big projects for you?
I'm trying to gear up the CD. I reckon it's the next big thing.
A writing retreat,
Yes.
followed
Yeah.
by a recording.
Yeah.
Are we going to take away your phones when you go on retreat? And really
That's probably
full on?
that's a good idea.
I need to look up what words rhyme with other words.
Good at thesaurus.
We listened to a little bit of Back to the Hills, a song you selected to open the segment with. Why that song?
That song was our first single off our record. It was nominated for the Golden Guitar Bluegrass Recording of the Year here in Australia, which is like
Nice.
the Country Music Australian Association big award thing. So that was a really, really exciting experience for the band. So that one's been really well received.
Do you have a website that we can put in the program though?
Yeah, the highstreetdrifters.com.
And now the hard question, and I'll let you confer, but are you familiar with Mount Rushmore in the United States, where four
Yes.
iconic individuals are carved into a... So, if I was to ask, who is your Mount Rushmore of bluegrass performers? What four would you say, let's iconicize them, who would you select?
Alive or dead or both?
Don't care.
Okay.
Jason Carter.
We interviewed him in
Oh, nice.
episode 9. Jason's amazing.
I've got a few lessons from
He's really great guy. So Jason Carter's up for one. You put one.
Okay.
I mean, Bill Monroe. I'm the mandolin player, so
There we are.
He's just gonna do it.
It's everything to me. That man's music. So
I don't want to steal Dan's, but it's got to be T-Dog. Tony Rice is just going to be there.
Glad you picked it.
Yeah.
Now I
Proud
can
of
figure it
yourself.
Now you get one more.
Gosh. I think Jimmy Martin was a bit of a character.
Mr.
Yeah.
Jimmy Martin, the king of bluegrass. We love him.
Yeah.
You guys are great. Thank you so much for taking time. I hope that we get to hear more of you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
There once was a time I could see the top of the ladder.
The festival was an overwhelming experience, but probably one of the most overwhelming exhibits was the instrument maker room. We had luthiers and makers from all over Australia showing the most incredible instruments. Among them was Laurie Grundy, well-known banjo player, but also maker of Grundy Banjos. We got to speak with his wife, Linda Dowdy, and by we, I mean myself and my wife Ruth. You'll hear her chiming in, helping me interview her. Fascinating woman with a great bluegrass story to tell, so let's listen in. So here we are with Linda Dowdy, who I've been fortunate enough to meet at the Grundy Banjo stand here at the Folk Fest. So Linda, thank you for taking time with us.
Thank you.
How does a girl from Missouri wind up here in Australia?
Well, bluegrass music was how I ended up here. Many years ago, I was married to a wonderful man for 30 years who was a big bluegrass music fan. The area that we lived in had stopped having so much bluegrass. We went to a music show, and the banjo was a decoration on the stage. When we saw that banjo, we thought we were going to get to hear it played, and we didn't. On the way home, I said, I guess if I'm going to get to hear a banjo, I'll have to learn to play one. And he said, well, you better hurry up. You're not getting any younger. So he was very supportive. And he also wanted to hear the banjo play. So I went immediately to the music store the next morning, and I bought the wrong thing. I got the best instrument they happened to have, but when I entered the real bluegrass world, I found out it wasn't what it needed to be. And that's how it started.
It's a long way from Branson, Missouri to Canberra, Australia. So how did you wind up here?
Well, there again, I said the banjo I bought was the wrong one.
Yep.
So now my husband is looking for real bluegrass groups to get me connected. And we were going to different festivals and this and that, meeting different people.
Yep.
And I was directed by a group where I went every week. And they bluegrass hardliners.
Yep.
And I learned all the rules for jamming and for being in time and in tune and all the things you must do to be accepted into the bluegrass world. And I ordered a Gibson Granada to come through the mail. Well, unfortunately, it was the year 2000 when Gibson was no longer making wonderful banjos we were all accustomed to, and no one could hear my banjo. It had no volume, which sent me on a journey that ended me up being adopted by Lonnie Hoppers, who had been Bill Monroe's banjo player for some years.
Yep.
I ended up meeting them at a bluegrass festival. I had lost my banjo teacher. I met Lonnie's wife. We hit it off and we began talking. And then I shared with her that I'd lost my banjo teacher and I started crying. And she said, "Honey, don't you worry, Lonnie will teach you." Well, Lonnie didn't teach banjo lessons. He only had 2 young men that were prodigies, that were superstars, and they are today, by the way. And he ended up with Linda. And all of her bad habits and all the things. And so that was my journey to Australia, because Lonnie had been over here to play for the Australians and teach them about real bluegrass music. And when he came over here, he didn't want to bring his banjos with him because of the trip and the dangers and so forth. They said, "You don't need to bring them. There's a wonderful luthier in Australia, and he will provide you with a banjo." As a result of Lonnie's trip, he had actually gotten a Grundy banjo for himself. He said when he heard my Granada banjo that was not what it should be, he said, "Don't buy anything right now, just wait. Try my banjo that's coming from Australia. If you like it, we'll order one for you." And that's what happened. And I sent my deposit of $1,000 across the ocean with all the good faith to this stranger, Laurie Grundy.
There you go.
And he made a banjo for me, and then he became a business associate and a teacher for me, and someone that I grew very, very fond of.
So he's a luthier. He's making these banjos.
Yes, he does. And he's an amazing luthier. And with the Grundy Banjos, Lonnie told me, he had done a spectrometer test on the metallurgy formula in Earl Scruggs' banjo that he played ground speed with. And he also tested the actual metal. They wanted to know that metallurgy formula.
So they could get as close as possible.
So he could get the sounds as close as possible. So Laurie's tone ring is an exact measurement of that tone ring that Earl used to play that. And he has those cast here in Australia, and has ever since he started making his own banjos with his name on it. So he's replicating the sound of the 30s with these banjos from the banjo that Earl played and Sonny Osborne played.
This is the signature sound.
So anyway, when Lonnie got his banjo and I went to my lesson and I played his banjo, I was really just smitten with the sound. I was not blessed with a lot of talent or other sorts of things, but I was maybe cursed or blessed with a really good ear. I really hear, and I really hear all of the dimensions. That was the big thing for me. And that's
fantastic.
How I ended up over here. The music teacher and his wife were all coming to Australia in 2005, and my husband and I were invited to come. My husband was a farmer. He really didn't want to go. He didn't want to travel outside the United States, and I wasn't going to go without him.
Right.
And so my daughter said, "Mom, if you'll go, I'll plan the whole trip and I'll go with you." So my daughter and I came to Australia, where we got to see where the banjos were made, and I got better acquainted with Laurie. So that's how we all met, you know.
What's your favorite kind of thing to play?
Oh, Earl Scruggs.
Yeah?
3-fingered.
So how did you end up here in Australia?
Well, sadly, my beautiful husband of 30 years passed away. And unbeknownst to me, my business associate and dear friend of 7 years came forward after he passed away and asked me if I would marry him.
Wow. This is like a fairy tale.
It was. And it was very confusing. It just took some time to get that sorted out. But anyway, I did. And I accepted a new life, and here I am today.
And you live in Missouri and Australia.
Yes, 6 months of the year in Missouri, 6 months of the year here.
And
he makes his banjos in the United States.
In Missouri, right?
Right, correct.
Yep. Makes them in
Eminence, Missouri.
Okay, and just so the listeners are interested in learning more about Grundy Banjos, where can they go?
There is a website, grundybanjos.com.
Okay.
And that's it.
Well,
and you can find it.
So let me ask you, you know Mount Rushmore, the 4 iconic U.S. personalities. Who is your bluegrass banjo player, Mount Rushmore? What 4 players would you put up?
Okay, well, of course, Earl.
Yes, needless to say.
Earl Scruggs. And I always really admired Sonny Osborne. And let's see, who else? Oh, of course. We all know J.D. Crowe.
J.D., of course.
Yeah. And let's see.
Now, you only get 4, so you choose wisely.
Okay. Laurie Grundy. Amazing banjo player.
Do you sing?
Well, Laurie said I had to if I was going to play and do music, so I sing songs, yes, I do, and I have what we call the back porch voice, which is acceptable. When I first started with the Mansfield group, I was told, now you can't sing and play a banjo too, because besides that, you don't have a bluegrass voice, you have a country voice. And I got to thinking about that, and I thought, we can't let other people say negative things, you know. So when Laurie came along and said, no, you need to sing, they don't want to hear just music, they want to hear a story. I thought, well, you know, I'm dipped in dyed Ozarks, and I come from Celtic heritage, so why don't I have a bluegrass voice? I've got to have. I'm born with it, right? So if they don't happen to recognize it's bluegrass, it really is. So I do sing, yes, but I'm no vocalist.
And how did you become a registered nurse?
Well, that's another interesting story. My 28-year-old wife of my first cousin, who I was very, very close to, died of breast cancer, and I was married with children. I had not gone to but a couple of years of college, which I never finished, and I ended up getting married and having a family. I went to the American Cancer Society to volunteer, and I couldn't do one thing. I couldn't type, I couldn't do anything. I was just like a social person with no skills at all, and I wanted to be a nurse from the time I was born. I thought about that. And so in honor of Elizabeth, so I could actually do something for other people, I went back to school with 3 children in tow and became a registered nurse. And I still have my license, and I got my 50-year certificate this year.
Wow,
50
amazing.
years, I still have my license.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. That's
Yep.
how I became a registered nurse, yes. And Laurie was a Victoria policeman and police prosecutor in his career. So we're sort of the police-nurse combination that's pretty common, actually.
Anything else that you'd like to mention?
Oh, yes, out in Eminence, Missouri, we have a very large ride. They've got 3,000 horse stalls. It's a trail ride company. And they also did the bluegrass music there as well. That's where I met Sonny Osborne. And my husband and I were trail bosses there for quite a number of years.
Oh my gosh.
And we rode the all-day fast ride on our Missouri Foxtrotters that we raised. We had a stallion and mares and so forth, raised our own horses. And that was part of my world. We also had 2 beautiful rivers there that we floated. And so we always said that a major, wonderful day in our world was to get to go ride your horse that morning, float the river that afternoon, and hear the bluegrass music that evening.
Sounds like heaven. Well, it's really a pleasure to get to meet you. Thank you for taking time.
Well, thanks for having me. I enjoyed talking to you.
What a great trip that was. I can't wait to get back. I'm hoping to return in time for some of the festivals. You can check out information on Crest Fest and Mountain Grass, the 2 major festivals. I have the information in the program notes. And also, shout out to the Violin Centre in Gordon, near Sydney. I traveled to Australia without my fiddle, just to spare it the rigors of the journey. And they were kind enough to lend me a fiddle for the several weeks I was there. They didn't charge me anything. They were very happy to lend it. And the center had more violins than I'd ever seen in my life. Everything ranging from high-quality student instruments up to the finest orchestral and virtuoso instruments. So if you happen to be in Sydney or Gordon, definitely check them out. Also, the Blue Mountains are a stunning mountain range in the vicinity of Sydney. And tucked away in those mountains is a town called Katoomba, and Katoomba music was incredible. We stopped in, and it had this wide selection of locally made instruments made from local materials, guitars and more standard instruments like mandolins, but also all kinds of folk instruments. And this staff was great and friendly. And I was very fortunate to spend a long afternoon there chatting, trying out all these great instruments. So check out Katoomba Music there in the program notes as well. So that's it for this episode. Really enjoyed sharing it with you. Next week we'll be back with Liz, and we'll be talking to Tatiana Hargraves. It's going to be a great interview, so don't miss that one. And we look forward to seeing you around the Jam Circle.